Welcome to Behind the Keys. My name is Pietro Catalano, founder and owner of CAAA here in Lucerne, of the Dineology concept. And today I'm really happy and excited to have my guests here, Ben from the US, from Chicago. And we had an amazing event yesterday about this new format, I would say. For me, it was a real pleasure to have you here.
Likewise.
And I was, how you felt the first time in Europe, how it was for you actually here in this environment. And as I know, you made a couple of them already in the States, yes. And how is your journey so far?
It's been great being here. It's similar in some ways.
Yeah.
It's sort of what I expected, but in other ways it's very, very different. The landscape here, even just the train in from Zurich, we flew into Zurich and then took the train to Lucerne, was beautiful. I didn't know that it recently snowed, so it just gave everything kind of a magical feel. It was just it was a really nice, a really scenic train ride in. Got to the train station, and since we've been here, since Monday, we got to see Old Town a few times. We got to walk on the bridge, been interacting with people the whole trip, whether it's been on the street, in the gym, at the different restaurants we've been to. Everybody's been really nice. It's definitely exceeded my expectations. I knew I was going to like it just because people whose travel opinions I trust have been telling me, you got to go to Europe. You got to try it for the first time. And I think I understand why people say that now. The food has been amazing. Hanging out with you guys all week has been amazing. Your whole team. Everything is super clean. Even the snow, like Chicago snow, it gets kind of rough after a few hours. It gets real gray and muddy. But this whole, the area we've been staying in has just been beautiful the whole time.
Yeah.
It's less windy too than Chicago, so the cold is more manageable.
Yes.
I don't like the cold, but this is doable. And I think the standout has been the food. Like in the food that we've had here, the food that you and Elena have made us, the food that we've had at these restaurants, the fast food, the McDonald's and the Burger King.
Yeah.
Just
different, yeah?
So much better than what we have in the States.
Wow.
I feel okay after eating them too, which is not the case in the States. I usually feel kind of sick after I eat fast food in the States. But the whole experience has been great.
Yeah.
I wish we could have stayed for longer, honestly, and seen more, but that just means we got to come back soon and spend more time here.
Yeah, I love that you contacted me in that time, actually in the right time when we planned to make the next step for Behind the Keys. And I love the concept, especially how you present yourself with this all new album, how you create with connected to food. And everything made sense for me, you know. This was no question about would I make it or not. It's just straight away yes. Just a couple of minutes. Didn't need me time to think, okay, let's sleep over, blah blah blah, and so on. And I really love it. And I was wondering how you came up with this idea to rap, actually, to create such an album. As we know, as we European, the rap scene is very rough. Yeah. And what you're doing, it's just beautiful. It's amazing, and elevate actually the rap scene. I could say it's almost like we create a really special menu, a really special experience. Beside on the normal comfort food. You know? I could call like the normal rap is like the comfort. But what you're doing, it's like much more elevated, much more experience. How you came with this idea, approach in that time?
So I've been rapping for a long time. I started pursuing a career in rap in 2014. And nothing really materialized for me until 2020 or 2021. And throughout that stretch, I wasn't really rapping about any particular thing. My focus wasn't any particular subject. That didn't happen until food came along, or food became something that I wanted to focus more on lyrically or substantively. I went to my first tasting menu dinner at the end of 2023 at a place called Atelier in Chicago. Up until that point, I wasn't really interested in the concept of a tasting menu because I've always been the type of person to spend as much money or as little money as possible on as much food as possible. And a tasting menu is just that flipped. So I just didn't really understand why anybody would do it. But a friend of mine strongly urged me to go to try it. So I tried it. And it was life-changing. It was a pivotal moment for me, like a formative moment in not just my artist career, but just I think for me as a person as well. What I wasn't really expecting was the level of mental satiation that I felt at the end of that dinner. And somehow made it so that I didn't need to be full, like physically full, because experiencing each course and the thoughtfulness that went into everything and being able to watch the precision from the table that I was sitting at, studying the movements and the different flavors and the textures and the colors. I had a notepad with me, so I was taking notes on every course as I went.
Nice.
And there were also a lot of unfamiliar ingredients for me, stuff that I'd never been exposed to. So I had a lot of questions, but it was all piquing my curiosity in a way that food never has for me before, never had for me before. And toward the end of that dinner, I realized that I was eating my way through an album, or what felt like an album. And in that moment, I thought to myself, well, why haven't I created a tasting menu that people can listen to, or why don't I create one? So I set out to do it that night. Like on the Uber ride home, I was just planning this out. I figured that the first step would be to really immerse myself in the food world. Like one tasting menu wasn't enough for me to make a whole album that's as focused as I want it to be. So I set out to create a video series where I was traveling all around the States, or wherever I could go really, to shoot a live performance video for each song on the album. But the concept was that I'd be set in a restaurant kitchen. So I'd be standing right in the middle of the kitchen. And I'd have the chefs working around me, moving all over the place. I wanted to capture the dynamism of a restaurant kitchen. And I pitched that idea to hundreds of chefs throughout the States and some in Canada also. I got 3 yeses initially. Chef Dano in Charleston at Vern's, Chef David at Nice in San Francisco, and Chef Garrett at Nonesuch in Oklahoma City. And with those yeses, Hunter and I just started traveling. My videographer Hunter and I started traveling everywhere, shoot these videos. By the end of 2024, we had traveled to 11 different cities and shot 14 different videos in restaurant kitchens. And throughout the whole process, I'm learning at each stop. I'm taking notes on all the dinners we're having at these restaurants. I'm talking to the chefs while we're shooting. I'm asking them questions about technique and how they came up with these ideas. And I'm beginning to understand that rap and food, but specifically rap and high-end food, fine dining, are very closely related, interwoven. A lot of the same techniques and characteristics are present in both. The ingenuity, the precision, the thoughtfulness. And that year that I spent, 2024, which is the year that I was shooting all these videos with Hunter, that year was the year of immersion for me. And by the end of the year, I had a project that was done that I was proud of, that I really created for chefs or for people who are really into food to listen to. Like, they'll catch the references. There's a lot of stuff in there, a lot of references that I make, a lot of descriptions that I use that are based on the meals that I had that year.
Yeah.
Almost everything actually on that album is based on the meals that I had. And I wanted to make something that I wanted to make an album in which I distilled the essence of a restaurant kitchen into the music. So I released the album end of 2024 after that year of traveling and eating and taking notes. And around that time, I decided I also wanted to create a dinner party series that would allow me to further showcase the album within the environments that inspired it. So restaurants. I wanted to partner with chefs and host these dinner parties where the menu for the dinner parties was based on the album songs. So there were so many food references throughout the album that I figured that it would be enough for a chef to pull from and create different courses. And a year later, I did 8 in the States, or 8 in North America last year. I did 7 in the States and 1 in Canada. And the partnership with you was the first one of this year. So I've been shooting my shot with thousands of chefs, thousands of restaurants. I haven't gotten very many responses even, let alone yeses or nos, but the chefs who have been interested have reached back out to me, and every single time it's worked beautifully because the interest has been mutual.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you reach me, I mean, the concept that we create a menu based on your lyrics, and it was super interesting because it's also open up our works with ingredients, which I will never use. Because we have a philosophy, you know, but it's a really a playful time, and it was beautiful to create this menu and a lot of fun, I would say, and this is cool, the combination how music can make so much impact, and awake so much emotion, but when we're thinking about music and food, we don't think about rap. This is beautiful, you know. It's absolutely something new, which I strongly believe it's a new format which creates for us, because we as a chef always say, okay, how we can make the next foreign dinner, how we can make something new, how we can entertain our guests, how we can make a different impact and so on. But this format, I was really impressed, and I love it a lot, and I believe you will get a huge success around the world. And I know chefs are very busy. They are really slow to answer, and you need to follow up things. And I was wondering if you also had some moment, if you think, okay, do I am on the right direction? It is really this part which I want to dedicate my life for. I'm sure that you also was in situation was difficult.
At multiple points.
Because
I sent a lot of pitches to a lot of chefs, a lot of restaurants. And there were various points where I wasn't getting any response. I wasn't even getting no's. The messages weren't even being seen. And to this day, a lot of messages still don't get seen. And initially, that kind of bothered me because I thought that I had something that was worth pursuing. And I thought that if anybody sees this, if I can put it in front of a chef, they'll understand what I'm trying to do. And if they like rap, which they might not like rap, and that's okay. But if they like rap, then this is something that would be a no-brainer for them. And it took me a little while. It took me a few months of the initial pitching stages for the video series, not even the dinner party series, but the video series, to remind myself that the mantra that I often come back to is, if you build it, they will come. I tell myself that most days, especially when things are slow, especially when there are lulls in interest and messages back, and when there are times where I have to follow up with the chef a month later, a couple weeks later. Just the idea that I still have a lot more work to do to make this concept undeniable. And at the point at which it becomes undeniable, then I can pitch to any chef anywhere, and I'm at least going to get a response. Even if it's, we're not interested, we're too busy, all that stuff is okay. But the reminder is that the further I move with this concept, the harder it's going to be for anybody to ignore it. And if people aren't coming to the concept, that just means that I haven't built it yet, or I haven't finished building it yet. So I think initially I was taking it kind of personally that there were chefs who weren't interested or that I wasn't getting responses. Yeah. But then I started working with the chefs who were very interested and who gave me the responses. And similar to music, it's very easy to agonize over the people who aren't paying attention and who aren't listening. It's a bit harder to step back and be appreciative of the people who are listening, or people who are paying attention. And that's something I had to learn how to do again with this food concept. Because for the past 4 years, I've been making music full time. For about 4.5, 5 years, I've been getting a lot of listeners. I've been getting a lot of attention. So I stopped feeling that way about music because the attention has been pretty constant. Like I don't get overlooked. At least I don't feel like I get overlooked in the way that I did when I first started making music. And now this is like starting over. It's like a new career in a way. And in the same vein as how I started with music, it's relearning how to roll with the punches and how to maneuver around what feels like a rejection, and to understand that a no right now doesn't necessarily mean a no later, and to understand that I'm still new to this concept. I'm still getting my feet under me. I'm still laying the groundwork for what I think will be successful in the future and what has been successful so far. But I can't take it personally if a chef who has a lot to lose, maybe financially, maybe culturally, is not super confident about this concept working right now. It's been a year that I've been doing it, and that's not a very long time.
Yeah.
I just know that I tell myself, another thing I ask myself is, like, if I were Jay-Z and I reached out to a restaurant and said, can we collaborate? They'd respond.
Yes.
Like they'd respond within
very
a
fast.
few minutes. Yeah. We'd be setting up dates tomorrow. So that's another reminder that the bigger I get, the larger I can make this concept.
True.
Once it becomes undeniable, once I can get to that level of, oh, this person wants to collaborate, we have to do this, then everything kind of answers itself. Everything sorts itself out. So I'm in pursuit of that level of undeniability. So yeah, there have been a lot of moments where stuff has been, I've been through dry spells, months at a time, without any responses, without making any forward progress. But that's just where I'm at right now. Yeah. And I have to be comfortable with that, because I can't get to the next level unless I am using it as motivation instead of agonizing over everybody who's not paying attention. I just have to make people pay attention.
Yeah, I can imagine. The community of the rap in the US is huge. I can tell in Switzerland we are not so far away.
Right.
Yeah. And when you're talking about your, I call them colleagues probably, artists around you, and how they respond when you say, okay, I'm sure they are curious, what are you doing when you introduce yourself? How is the response of this format, what you're doing?
For the artists?
Yes.
It's been good. Yeah. It's been good because I don't think there are any other artists who are doing this. Yeah. The only other artist I can think of is Action Bronson, who's traveling all over the world with his own food installations, but it's just not this.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And from what I can understand, he's close with a lot of chefs worldwide. Yeah. Is often in Europe collaborating with chefs, but he's a chef himself, so I think he'll do a lot of the cooking. And
interesting.
And those are his own really cool concepts.
Yeah.
But I knew when I came up with this one that I was pretty confident that it was something that nobody had done before. So when I talk to artists about it, it's easier to talk to chefs about it than music artists. I have a lot of friends who are very supportive, and artist friends, producer friends, colleagues. But I talk about the idea more often with chefs than I do my chef friends and acquaintances than I do with my music friends, because it's closer to the chef world, I think, than the music world. And in understanding that the two art forms are very similar, but almost every chef has some kind of background in music or a love for music, but not every artist or producer has background in food or a love for food.
True.
Like,
I see you like a kind of ambassador of this fine dining. You know, like you rap, you get an attention, an audience. You can even like teaching young generation how nice and cool it is in dining in such an environment. And I find this really, really interesting, you know, this approach to engage new people. And I think, did you get feedbacks from younger generation? They say, because of this, I was going to eat somewhere like in a restaurant.
Especially when the album released, or I'll get most of that type of feedback in relation to the album, where somebody will say, this made me want to go to this restaurant or try this food or try this reference that you're making. And that's always really cool, because one, it means that people are really listening to the music, like they're really listening to the words I'm saying. But two, it means that people are chasing the same type of experience that I had at that tasting menu dinner, my first one 3 years ago or 2 years ago, which I know that if it was life-changing for me, it could be life-changing for anybody. And one thing that I'm struggling to contend with is the balance between creating these events, which are very carefully curated, with the highest level of highest quality ingredients, and the price. Because for a lot of people, they can't spend $200, $300 for a dinner party. But what they can do, or what I hope I can inspire people to do, is maybe one night a week or one night a month, you buy a nicer cut of meat for yourself. Or you go to a restaurant to just experiment for one night, because that one night can change everything. It can reconfigure how you think about food, how you think about the world. And what I hope all of this stuff does is push people to experience food in a different way and to get out of their comfort zone a little bit. Even if it doesn't mean, like, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that they are going and spending $500 on a meal, but there is an area between that and what somebody eats every day that I think is a nice middle point that could push somebody to start to think about food differently in terms of the ethics, the sustainability, the accessibility, the cultural components that are sometimes hidden because things get mixed up so often, especially in the States. And just developing a better appreciation for like how the food gets on your plate, for how carefully it's constructed, how the ingredients are fit together by chefs who are processing all these different stimuli. Ultimately, that is what I want to push people toward. And in the future, if I can get this idea off the ground, if I'm making enough money from sponsorships and stuff, it'd be great to be able to subsidize tickets for people, or just have free events that people can come to. Make sure the chef is taken care of, make sure the chef's team is taken care of. 5 tickets free, 10 tickets free. Everybody gets to come in for free, 4 or 5 course menu, because I think that could be the difference between somebody taking on a new exploratory angle to food and somebody just staying in the same space they've been in for their entire lives and eating the same foods and not really venturing outside of that.
No, I agree. And when especially, you, as you say, the impact you see only later. I mean, it takes time, and but it's so important to stick with this vision and create and believe in this format, because it will be a pity, and I hope that you stay strong with this idea and push it. And as I say, I loved from the beginning this idea. And what is your next? Do you know already your next destination? Where do you go?
So I don't know the next destination yet. I know the cities. I just don't know which one is next. But I'll be in a few spots in the States.
Yeah.
In the coming months, I'll be in. It's looking like I'll be in Atlanta, San Francisco, Miami, Orlando, and a few other states, or a few other cities scattered throughout the States. And in March, I can confirm that I'll be in Portugal for a few nights at a place in Braga. And hopefully we'll be able to string together a few more stops in Spain and in Portugal, so I can maybe just make that the trip. Spain, Portugal be very easy in terms of travel, which would be nice. But to go back to what you were just saying about creating something new and sticking with an idea, even if you don't necessarily get the attention that you deserve. And we talked about this a few days ago, where what you're doing right now in Lucerne is something that is in some ways incongruent with the culture here, the culture surrounding food. And you've been in this space for 2 years, and you've seen success. You've undoubtedly seen success, objectively seen success, especially with how it relates to your Best Chef Award. But part of being an artist, whether you're a chef or a music artist or a visual artist, is that some part of you has to understand that you don't really get to dictate when you get appreciated, when your art gets appreciated, and it might come after you finish. For some people, they get to have it while they're doing it, but that's not how it works for everybody. But at the end of the day, if you were the pioneer of a concept, if what you were doing here, which I've seen described as transalpine cuisine in a way that I don't know if any other places in Lucerne are doing it, hopefully you get that attention like now, next year, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. But even if you don't, you also have to understand that what I'm doing right now is laying the groundwork for hundreds, if not thousands of other chefs to come into my path and create something else. And if they get that acclaim, then that means that goes to you too. And I see the same thing for music, and I see the same thing for all different types of art. That there's a part of you, probably a big part of you, that wants that. You want that now. You want that validation. I want that validation. I want things to work right now. But even if things don't work right now and they work for somebody else later, or they work for this concept, to push this concept forward later, then that's also a win. It's a different type of win.
Yes, different. You inspire them. Absolutely. No, I agree. And what would you? I think a lot of young generation, they try to step in as an artist. As now the new technology is coming, it's much more easy to create something faster than before.
For sure.
You reach much more faster the audience if you have the right tool. And what would you say to them, to really young people, to say, hey, listen, do it this way, do it right?
Yeah. Well, you get out of it what you put into it. And if you're taking shortcuts artistically and creatively, then there's a cost to that. And sometimes the cost is you don't really learn how to push yourself creatively if you're leaning on things like AI to create for you. And some people are okay with that. But I think if you were to assess what type of artist is okay with that, it's probably the artists who are more concerned with making a living, making money off of what they're doing than creating something meaningful. I'm not saying that you can't create meaningful art with the aid of AI or other programs, because you can, but there's a lot of value in the humanity of art and the humanity of everyday things that people are missing by engaging with AI and things like that the way they have been. I think it's messing with people's curiosity. I think it's messing with their problem-solving abilities. And it's the type of thing that if people continue to use it the way they do, even regular people who are not doing creative things, then a lot of things that make us human just atrophy. And I don't think that's good for a society. I especially think that for creatives, it's dangerous because it pushes art in a direction that is just not really real. It's not really human. And there are aspects of humanity mixed in, but that's never what, like, art has always been human. It's human creations based on the human experience. So I would caution artists to be careful with how much they're using it and what they're using it for. I think if they can recognize that they're not thinking about things anymore, they're not having creative thoughts, that their first instinct, instead of troubleshooting how to fix this painting or how to finish this song, is to lean on artificial intelligence, I would just urge them to do what everybody's done since the beginning of time and figure it out themselves. Because that's what makes the coolest art, and that's what has historically made the coolest art. I also think that the bubble has to break at some point, and the people who will be left will be the people who know how to create art and have been doing it. And the people who have been leaning on AI to help them are going to be in a more precarious position than the people who have been creating on their own and with only human elements involved.
No, agreed. No, I really want to say thank you, Ben, that you was here in Lucerne, and hopefully we continue this relation to make other nice events. And yeah, I wish you a lot of success, a lot of power, energy, and I'm sure you will get it, the right feedback, respond. And again, thank you. And I wish you a nice journey here in Lucerne. And a nice travel back to Chicago.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for the new next upcoming events. And I hope you enjoy. And my name is Pietro Catalano from CAAA Lucerne.